The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for one reason. The Kythera were dying, and nobody cared. Ambassador Vexthul of the Hegemony spoke first, his forearms gesturing dismissively at the holographic display showing the dying planet of Kythros. Council members, we have wasted enough resources on this evolutionary mistake. The Kythera cannot even lift their own body weight. Their skin tears if they move too quickly. They are the weakest species in known space. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the vast chamber. Representatives from 100 worlds nodded their heads, tentacles, and other appendages in unison. The Kythera had been a disappointment from the moment they achieved space travel. Their bodies were so fragile that they needed special protective suits just to survive in normal gravity. Their homeworld was failing, poisoned by industrial accidents they were too weak to prevent. The cost of relocation would be enormous, continued Vexthul. And for what? A species that contributes nothing to galactic civilization. They cannot fight. They cannot build. They can barely survive. Captain Sarah Chen of Earth's diplomatic corps stood slowly. The chamber fell quiet. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having joined only 50 years ago. Most species still viewed them with curiosity rather than respect. Earth requests permission to address the council, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. Vexthul's eyes narrowed. The humans wish to speak? Very well, but make it quick. We have important matters to discuss after we resolve this situation. Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, her boots clicking on the crystalline floor. She had spent months studying the Kythera files, preparing for this moment. Honored representatives, I come before you with a proposal. Earth will accept the entire Kythera population as refugees. The chamber erupted in shocked chittering, roaring, and whatever sounds the various species made when surprised. Vexthul slammed his staff against the floor. Silence. Human, are you serious? You want to take in 3 billion failures? We are completely serious, Sarah replied. Our planet has space. Our people have experience integrating with other species. We believe the Kythera deserve a chance to survive. A delegate from the Crystarch Union spoke up, her voice like breaking glass. Humans, this is foolish even by your standards. The Kythera are weak. They offer nothing in return. Why waste your resources on evolutionary dead ends? Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as possible, because that's what civilized beings do. We help those who need help. We don't abandon people just because they're different or struggling. The laughter that followed was not kind. Species throughout the chamber made sounds of amusement and derision. Vexthul raised his staff again. Very well, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. If the humans want to collect the galaxy's trash, let them. All in favor of allowing Earth to take the Kythera? The vote was swift and unanimous. Not because the council wanted to help the Kythera, but because they wanted them gone and didn't care where they went. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Harmony, watching as her fleet approached Kythros. The planet was dying. The oceans had turned gray from pollution. The atmosphere was thick with industrial waste. It was a miracle any Kythera were still alive. Captain, called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, we're receiving transmissions from the surface. The Kythera leadership wants to speak with you. The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that made Sarah's heart ache. The Kythera delegate was so thin she could see his bones through his translucent skin. His large eyes were filled with desperate hope. Human captain, he said in a voice like whispered wind. I am Speaker Elthis, is it true? Will you really take us from this place? Yes, Sarah said firmly. Every single one of you who wants to come. We have ships, supplies, and a new home waiting for you. The creature's eyes began to glow with soft patterns of light. Other Kythera appeared on the screen, all displaying the same luminous response. Sarah had never seen anything like it. What are they doing? Asked Torres. Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's xenobiologist, leaned forward with intense interest. I think they're communicating with each other. Look at the patterns. They're synchronized but complex. This isn't just emotional response. This is language. On the screen, Speaker Aelthis raised his delicate hands. Captain Chen, you have given us something we had forgotten existed. Hope. We accept your offer with gratitude that has no words in any tongue. The evacuation took 6 months. Every day, Sarah watched as Kythera families boarded her ships. They were so careful, so gentle with everything they touched. Children clung to parents with grip so light it seemed like a breeze might separate them. Yet there was something else Sarah noticed. They were always watching. Always learning. The Cathara observed everything the human crews did with an intensity that was almost unsettling. When Dr. Webb tried to study their bioluminescent communication, they seemed to understand his equipment better than he did within hours. It's remarkable, Webb told Sarah during one of their evening briefings. Their neural activity is off the charts. I've never seen brain patterns like this. It's like they're processing information at speeds that should be impossible for biological beings. But they're still weak, Torres pointed out. I watched one of them struggle to lift a water container that weighs maybe 2 pounds. Physical weakness doesn't mean mental weakness, Webb replied. In fact, I'm starting to wonder if their physical frailty might have pushed their mental development in directions we've never seen before. The last ship left Kithros on a cold morning when the planet's sun barely penetrated the smog. Sarah stood on the observation deck with Speaker Aelthus, watching their dying world shrink in the distance. Do you regret leaving? She asked. The old Kithara's skin flickered with soft patterns. Captain, our people have a saying. The flower that cannot grow in poison soil may bloom beyond imagination in clean earth. We do not regret leaving. We regret only that it took us so long to find gardeners who understood this truth. As the fleet made its way toward Earth, news of the human charity case spread throughout the galaxy. The hegemony broadcast regular updates mocking Earth's collection of useless creatures. Trade partners questioned humanity's judgment. Military analysts wondered if Earth had grown soft. Admiral Voss of the hegemony's main fleet sent a message to Earth's government. Humans have always been peculiar, but this exceeds all bounds of logic. You have taken in billions of beings who cannot even defend themselves. We hope you don't expect them to contribute anything meaningful to your society. On Earth, preparations were massive. Entire continents had been set aside for Kithara settlement. Special facilities were built to accommodate their unique needs. Medical teams trained to work with their fragile biology. Everything was ready for their arrival. Sarah stood in the main settlement area as the first Cathara stepped onto Earth's surface. The gravity was gentler here than on most worlds, and the air was clean. She watched as families emerged from the ships, their skin patterns dancing with what she had learned to recognize as wonder and gratitude. Dr. Webb appeared beside her, datapad in hand and excitement in his voice. Sarah, I've been analyzing their communication patterns during the journey. This bioluminescence isn't just language, it's something more complex. I think they might be sharing thoughts, memories, even sensory experiences. What does that mean? I'm not sure yet, but I think we're about to find out that the galaxy's assessment of the Kithara was very, very wrong. As the evacuation ship settled on Earth's surface and Cathara families began their new lives, Ambassador Vexthul was already planning his next moves. The humans had made themselves look weak by taking in refugees. Soon they would learn that kindness was a luxury the galaxy could not afford. But in the settlement areas, something was beginning that would change everything. Young Cathara were approaching human volunteers, their skin patterns bright with curiosity and hope. When the first pairs began to form bonds that went deeper than anyone imagined, the real story would begin. The galaxy had called the Cathara evolution's greatest failure. They were about to discover just how wrong they could be. 6 months after the Cathara arrived on Earth, Dr. Marcus Webb was questioning everything he thought he knew about biology. He stood in his laboratory, watching security footage from the settlement areas for the 100th time. On the screen, a young Cathara named Zephyri was working with Marine Corporal Jake Martinez on what should have been a simple coordination exercise. Instead, Webb was witnessing something that defied explanation. Computer, replay section 12 to 15, Webb commanded. The footage showed Jake and Zephyri standing 10 feet apart facing a series of moving targets. Without any visible communication, they moved in perfect synchronization. Jake would duck left just as Zephyri's skin patterns flashed blue. Zephyri would point right exactly when Jake turned to look in that direction. They completed the exercise in half the time of any human team with perfect scores. Dr. Webb, his assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim, entered the lab carrying a stack of test results. The neural scans from the bonded pairs are ready. You're going to want to see this. Webb took the data pad and nearly dropped it. These readings can't be right. According to this, both human and Kithara brains are showing synchronized neural activity across impossible distances. It gets stranger, Kim said. Yesterday I tested a bonded pair separated by 50 miles. When we showed Martinez a red circle, Zephyri's brain registered visual cortex activity even though he was in a completely different room with no visual stimuli. Webb sat down heavily. Are you telling me they're sharing sensory input? More than that. Look at page 3. Webb flipped through the data. Shared memory formation? Kim, this suggests they're creating joint memories, as if they experienced events together even when they were apart. A knock on the lab door interrupted them. Captain Sarah Chen entered, looking tired but excited. Dr. Webb, I need your assessment. The military wants to know if these human Kithra bonds are safe to continue. Webb gestured to the screens around his lab. Sarah, what we're seeing isn't just safe. It's revolutionary. These pairs aren't just working together. They're becoming something new. Chen frowned. What do you mean? Watch this, Webb said, pulling up another video. This is from yesterday's combat simulation. The footage showed a team of bonded pairs moving through a mock battlefield. The humans and Kithera moved like dancers, each pair perfectly coordinated with the others. When enemies appeared from hidden positions, the Kithera somehow knew exactly where to look before the threats became visible. How are they doing that? Chen asked. Dr. Kim spoke up. We think the Kithera have limited precognitive abilities. Not fortune-telling, but the ability to process probability and pattern recognition at speeds that let them predict immediate future events. And when bonded with humans, Webb added, this information is shared instantly. The human gets the Kithera's predictive abilities, while the Kithera gains access to human physical strength and reflexes. Chen watched as the bonded pairs completed the simulation without a single casualty, despite facing odds that should have been impossible. What are the military implications? Before Webb could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the lab in red as the base's communication system crackled to life. All personnel to stations. Unknown ships approaching Earth space. This is not a drill. Chen was already moving toward the door. I need to get to the command center. Keep studying these bonds. I have a feeling we're going to need to understand them very soon. As Chen left, Webb turned back to his data. The approaching ships belonged to the Iron Talon Syndicate, a mercenary group known for testing new military technologies through practical applications. Someone had hired them to test Earth's new defensive capabilities. Admiral Voss of the Hegemony sat in his command ship, hidden in the outer asteroid belt. He had paid the Iron Talon a considerable sum to probe Earth's defenses. The humans had made themselves look weak by taking in refugees. Now he would see just how weak they really were. Sir, reported his intelligence officer, the Iron Talon fleet is beginning their attack run. 12 heavy cruisers against Earth's colonial defense stations. Excellent, Voss replied. Let's see how well the humans fight when they're protecting their precious pets. On Earth, General Torres stood in the command center as reports flooded in. Ma'am, Iron Talon ships have engaged our outer defenses. Standard formation, heavy weapons. Our automated systems are holding, but they'll break through within the hour. Chen entered the command center at a run. General, I recommend we deploy the bonded pairs. Torres looked skeptical. Captain, those are experimental units. We don't know if they're combat ready. With respect, General, we don't have a choice. And I think they're more ready than we realize. Torres hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Very well. Alert all bonded pair units. Scramble fighters. 20 minutes later, Earth's defense fighters launched into space. To any outside observer, they looked like standard human military craft. But inside each fighter sat two, beings whose minds had become something greater than the sum of their parts. Jake Martinez gripped his fighter's controls while Zephyri sat in the specialized rear seat designed for Kithera physiology. Through their bond, Jake could feel his partner's consciousness overlaying his own awareness like a second layer of reality. Target vectors coming in fast, Jake said over the radio. 12 heavy cruisers, standard attack formation. Through Zephyri's enhanced perception, Jake could see the enemy ships not just as they were, but as they would be. The Kithera's probability calculations showed him where each ship would move, what weapons they would fire, even which pilots were most likely to make tactical errors. Blue Squadron. Enemy formation is going to split in 30 seconds, Jake reported, somehow knowing this with absolute certainty. 3 ships will break left, 4 right, 5 will maintain course. How can you possibly know that? Came a voice from Blue Leader. Jake didn't have time to explain. The enemy formation split exactly as he had predicted. Lieutenant Amy Chen and her Cathara partner Velthar were positioned to intercept the left formation. Through their bond, Amy felt her reaction time increase beyond anything she had ever experienced. Velthar's pattern recognition abilities let her see enemy weapon charges building up before they fired. "Missile lock detected," Amy said, diving her fighter into an impossible spiral pattern that Velthar had calculated would avoid all 3 incoming projectiles. The missiles passed harmlessly by as Amy lined up her own shot. But what happened next shocked everyone watching from Earth's command center. All 20 bonded pair fighters began moving in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. When one pair spotted an enemy weak point, somehow all the others knew instantly. When a fighter needed covering fire, support appeared exactly where and when it was needed. General Torres watched the tactical display in amazement. How are they coordinating so perfectly? We're not seeing any communications between them. Dr. Webb, who had been called to the command center, studied the fighter movement patterns. "General, I don't think they're communicating in any way we understand. I think they're sharing awareness directly through their bonds." The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the Iron Talon ships retreated, they left behind 6 destroyed cruisers and a reputation for invincibility that would never recover. Earth's fighters suffered 0 casualties. Admiral Voss stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. "What just happened? How did colonial defense fighters destroy half of the Iron Talon fleet?" His intelligence officer was frantically reviewing battle footage. "Sir, I don't understand it either. The human ships moved like they knew where our people would be before our people knew themselves." Back on Earth, Jake Martinez and Zephyri climbed out of their fighter. Other bonded pairs were doing the same across the landing bays. But something had changed during the battle. The bonds had grown stronger. "Jake," Zephyri said, his skin patterns flickering with excitement and concern. "I can still feel the others. Even though they're far away, I can sense their thoughts." Dr. Webb rushed over with his portable scanners. "Don't move! I need to record this immediately." The readings made Webb's hands shake. "The bonds are expanding. You're not just connected to each other anymore. You're all becoming connected to each other." General Torres approached the group. "Doctor, what are the implications?" Webb looked up from his scanner. "General, I think the Cathara aren't just psychically gifted individuals. I think they're fragments of something much larger. And bonding with humans is helping them rediscover their true nature." Across the galaxy, news of the Iron Talon's defeat spread like wildfire. The mercenary group that had never lost a battle had been destroyed by colonial defense forces. Military analysts struggled to understand what had happened. On the Hegemony flagship, Admiral Voss was receiving reports from across known space. "Sir, 3 more pirate groups have requested information about Earth's new defensive capabilities. The Christarch Union is asking if we know what technology the humans are using." Voss stared at the tactical footage from the battle. "I don't think it's technology. I think we underestimated the Cathara, and now the humans have weaponized them." But Admiral Voss was wrong about one crucial detail. The humans hadn't weaponized the Cathara. They had simply given them a chance to remember what they really were. And as the bonds between humans and Cathara continued to grow stronger, both species were Evo. The galaxy learned the truth about Earth's bonded warriors 3 months after the Iron Talon incident. It happened on a mining colony called Kepler's Rest, where 50,000 civilians were about to discover that humanity's pet project had become something far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Commander Rex, Thorn of the Crimson Fang mercenary fleet, studied the intelligence reports with growing excitement. Kepler's Rest was perfect for his needs. The colony was isolated, lightly defended, and most importantly, it had just received a shipment of refined quantum crystals worth more than most planetary budgets. "Captain, are you certain about this target?" asked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vash. "The reports say Earth has sent some kind of special forces unit there." Thorn laughed, his scarred face twisting into a grin. "Special forces? Vash, I've seen the footage from Iron Talon. A few lucky shots against overconfident pirates doesn't make Earth a military power. This will be easy money." What Thorn didn't know was that Kepler's Rest had become a testing ground for something unprecedented. 12 bonded pairs had been stationed there as part of Earth's new rapid response protocol. Not as guards, but as early warning systems for the expanding network of human colonies. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos checked her equipment one final time as her Kythera partner, Nithara, settled into the specialized combat harness they had developed together. After 6 months of bonding, their connection had grown so strong that Maria sometimes forgot where her consciousness ended and Nithara's began. Perimeter. Sensors are showing movement in the outer asteroid field, reported Corporal Williams from the communication station. Could be normal traffic, but Zara's getting some weird readings. Zara was Corporal Williams's Kythera partner, and her probability analysis had saved their unit more than once during training exercises. If she was concerned, it was worth paying attention to. Through her bond with Nithara, Maria felt a familiar sensation washing over her mind. It was like standing in an ocean of information, with currents of possibility flowing in all directions. The Kythera's precognitive abilities had grown stronger since the bonding began, and now Maria could access them directly. Zara's right, Maria said, her voice taking on the distant quality that indicated she was processing Kythera-enhanced information. 37 ships, military configuration, attempting stealth approach. They'll reach the colony in 4 hours. Williams stared at her. How can you possibly know that? The sensors show maybe 5 contacts and they're too far away to get detailed readings. Maria opened her eyes and Williams saw that familiar silver glow that appeared when the bonded pairs were deeply connected. Because Nithara can see probability patterns in the sensor data that our computers miss, and because the other pairs are sharing their data through the network. The network. That was what Dr. Webb had started calling the growing connection between all bonded pairs. What had begun as individual partnerships was evolving into something larger and more complex. Each pair remained distinct, but they could share information and coordinate actions across vast distances. Alert the colony leadership, Maria ordered. Incoming hostile fleet, size and configuration unknown but substantial. Recommend immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel. 2 hours later, Commander Thorne's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler's rest system. His ships were powerful and numerous, designed to overwhelm colonial defenses through superior firepower. Sensors show minimal defensive installations, reported his tactical officer. 2 orbital platforms, standard colonial defense grid. No military vessels detected. Thorne nodded with satisfaction. Begin the approach. Target the defense platforms first, then demand surrender. I want those crystals intact. What his sensors couldn't detect were the 12 bonded pairs distributed throughout the system. They weren't hiding in ships or stations, but in small stealth pods that registered as space debris on most scanning systems. Each pair had volunteered for what should have been a suicide mission. Maria floated in the cramped confines of her stealth pod, Nithara secured beside her. Through the bond, she could feel the presence of the other 11 pairs positioned throughout the asteroid field. They were like points of light in her consciousness, each one sharing tactical information and coordinating their movements. Target acquisition complete, she whispered into her communication system. All pairs report ready. The response came not through radio but through the bond network itself. 11 confirmations appeared in her mind simultaneously, along with detailed tactical assessments from each position. Commander, Thorne was reviewing his attack plan when everything went wrong at once. The first sign of trouble was when his lead destroyer simply vanished from sensors. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of debris. Report, Thorne roared. Unknown weapons fire from multiple positions, his tactical officer replied, panic clear in his voice. I'm detecting at least 12 separate attack vectors, but sensors show no enemy ships. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying than Thorne could imagine. The bonded pairs weren't fighting like individual units. They were fighting like organs of a single organism. Maria's pod launched its torpedo barrage at precisely the same moment as 5 other pairs, all targeting the same enemy cruiser from different angles. The ship's defensive systems, designed to handle attacks from 1 or 2 directions, were overwhelmed by the perfectly coordinated assault. But the real advantage wasn't the coordination. It was the prediction. Through Nithara's enhanced pattern recognition, Maria could see where each enemy ship would move before the ship's own captain had made the decision. When Commander Thorne ordered evasive maneuvers, 6 bonded pairs were already firing at where his ship would be, not where it currently was. This is impossible, Thorne screamed as another of his ships exploded. How are they predicting our movements? His intelligence officer was frantically scanning communications frequencies. Sir, I'm not detecting any enemy communications at all. They're coordinating without radio contact. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, Commander Thorne's fleet of 37 ships had been reduced to 7 heavily damaged vessels limping away from the system. The bonded pairs had suffered no casualties. The footage reached Earth's command center 6 hours later. General Torres watched in stunned silence as the tactical display showed 12 small pods, systematically destroying a fleet 30 times their size. My God, she whispered. They're not just sharing information anymore. They're thinking as one organism. Dr. Webb stood beside her, analyzing the battle data in real time. General, look at these coordination patterns. The attack sequences are too complex for human minds to process individually. They had to be thinking as a collective intelligence to pull this off. Captain Sarah Chen entered the command center with a priority message from Earth's intelligence service. General, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Every major military power is demanding to know what technology we used at Kepler's Rest. It's not technology, Torres said grimly. It's evolution, and I don't think we can control it anymore. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Voss received the battle footage with growing horror. The Iron Talon incident could have been explained as luck or new weapons technology. But this was something else entirely. Analysis complete, Admiral, reported his chief scientist. The coordination patterns shown in this battle are consistent with hive mind intelligence. The humans appear to have created some kind of collective consciousness. Voss studied the tactical data. How many of these bonded pairs do the humans have? Intelligence estimates approximately 2,000 pairs currently active, with more being trained every month. Voss felt a chill run down his spine. 2,000 individuals with the power to think and fight as one organism. If the humans could field even 100 bonded pairs in fleet combat, they could challenge the hegemony itself. Send a message to the Council, Voss ordered. The human experiment has gone too far. They've created a threat to galactic stability. But across space, in the hidden research stations where the galaxy's most advanced scientists worked, a different conversation was taking place. The Christarch Union's head researcher, Dr. Zelith, was analyzing the same battle footage with fascination rather than fear. Remarkable, she said to her assistant. The humans have accidentally accomplished what we've been trying to achieve for centuries. They've created a stable collective intelligence without losing individual consciousness. Should we inform the hegemony of our analysis? The assistant asked. Dr. Zelith considered this carefully. No, I think we should contact Earth directly. If they're willing to share this technology, the Christarch Union would be very interested in forming an alliance. The news of Kepler's Rest spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Some species reacted with fear, others with anger, and a few with intense curiosity. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Hidden in the Outer Rim territories, the Valdris Republic had been watching human activities with growing interest. As a species that had been enslaved by the hegemony for 3, General Elena Torres stood before the assembled bonded pairs in the training facility on Luna Base, watching something that shouldn't have been possible. 300 human Kythera pairs moved through complex combat exercises without a single verbal command or radio transmission. They flowed like water, each pair anticipating the other's movements with perfect precision. Phase 2, Urban Combat Simulation, announced Dr. Webb over the intercom. The training arena transformed into a replica city street, complete with hostile targets and civilian populations to protect. Torres watched as the bonded pairs immediately dispersed into the simulation. But instead of moving as individual teams, they coordinated like a single organism with 300 bodies. When hostiles appeared in Building A, pairs in Buildings C and F were already moving to cut off escape routes. When civilians needed evacuation from the eastern sector, Western teams created diversions without being asked. Simulation complete, Webb announced. Perfect score. 0 civilian casualties. All hostiles neutralized in 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Torres shook her head in amazement. That's a new record. They're getting better. Not just better, Webb replied, joining her in the observation deck. Different. General, the bonded pairs aren't just enhanced humans anymore. They're becoming something entirely new. Torres studied the neural readouts Webb handed her. These brain scan patterns, they look like computer network traffic. That's because they essentially are network traffic. The bonded pairs are sharing consciousness across the entire group. Individual thoughts, memories, tactical assessments, even sensory input can be accessed by any pair in the network. Torres felt a chill. Webb, are you telling me we've created a hive mind? Not exactly. Each individual retains their personal identity and free will, but they can choose to merge their consciousness temporarily for complex tasks. It's like the difference between a computer network and a single supercomputer. Down in the training area, Sergeant Maria Santos was experiencing the network connection firsthand. Through her bond with Nithara, she could feel the presence of every other pair in the facility. It was like standing in a vast library where she could access any book instantly. Maria, spoke a familiar voice in her mind. It was Jake Martinez, her squad leader, communicating through the network rather than radio. Command wants to see us in Conference Room Alpha. Maria nodded to her Kythera partner. Did you feel that too? Nithara's skin patterns flickered with amusement. Feel it? Maria, I helped process the message before Jake even formed the words. The network grows stronger every day. 20 minutes later, 12 squad leaders and their Kythera partners gathered in the secure conference room. General Torres entered with Dr. Webb and Captain Chen, all carrying classified briefing folders. Ladies and gentlemen, Torres began, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council declared humanity and the Kythera to be a threat to galactic stability. The room fell silent. Through the network, Maria could feel the shock and anger of her fellow bonded warriors. Furthermore, Torres continued, the hegemony has been authorized to use military force to, quote, neutralize the threat, unquote. Intelligence suggests they're assembling the largest fleet in their history. Jake Martinez stood up. General, how large a fleet are we talking about? Conservative estimates suggest 1,500 warships, including 40 dreadnoughts. More than enough to reduce Earth to asteroid dust. The silence that followed was broken by Corporal Williams. Ma'am, when will they arrive? 6 weeks. Maybe less, Dr. Webb stepped forward. But we have one advantage they don't know about. The Valdris Republic has shared historical records about the Kythera. We've learned that your partners aren't just psychically gifted individuals. They're fragments of an ancient collective intelligence that once spanned the galaxy. Nithara spoke for the first time, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking for many Kythera simultaneously. Dr. Webb speaks truth. We remember now, through the bonds with humans, we were eternal thought. We were peace. The ancestors of the hegemony feared our unity and shattered our consciousness across the stars. Maria felt a surge of information through the network. Suddenly she could see flashes of memory that weren't her own. A galaxy where millions of minds shared thoughts and dreams. Civilizations that solved problems through collective wisdom rather than conflict. And then the war that scattered it all. The bonding with humans has allowed us to begin remembering, Nithara continued. Each bond is like finding a lost piece of ourselves. But we are still incomplete. General Torres leaned forward. What would it take to make you complete? The response came not from Nithara alone, but from every Kythera in the room speaking in unison. More bonds, many more. When enough fragments are connected through human partners, eternal thought can be reborn. Dr. Webb checked his datapad. Based on our current bonding rate, it would take years to reach the numbers you're talking about. We have weeks before the hegemony arrives. Jake Martinez stood up again. Then we fight with what we have. Jake, you're talking about 300 bonded pairs against 1,500 warships, Captain Chen said. The odds are impossible. Through the network, Maria felt a strange sense of calm descending over the group. It was coming from the Kythera, spreading through their human partners like a warm current. Captain Chen, Maria said, surprised to hear her own voice speaking words that felt like they came from somewhere deeper than her individual consciousness. The odds are only impossible if you think like individuals fighting other individuals. But we don't fight as individuals anymore. Over the following weeks, something unprecedented happened throughout human space. Every bonded pair, whether on Earth, Luna, Mars, or the outer colonies, began training together through the network connection. Physical distance became irrelevant as consciousness merged across light years. Lieutenant Commander David Park stood on the bridge of the destroyer Resilience. His Kythera partner, Silthera, connected to the ship's navigation systems through their bond. Around them, a fleet of 40 human ships prepared for the largest battle in Earth's history. All ships report ready, announced Captain Foster from the command chair. Bonded pairs confirm network connection established. Through Silthera, David could feel the presence of every bonded pair in the fleet. More than that, he could feel pairs stationed on Luna Base, Earth's surface, and even the outer colonies. The network had grown beyond anything they had imagined possible. "Captain," David reported, "the network is showing me something strange. Silthera says the hegemony fleet is larger than our intelligence estimated. 2,000 ships, not 1,500. Captain Foster turned to the tactical display. "How can you possibly know that?" "They're still 3 hours out." David closed his eyes, letting the network information flow through him. Because the Kythera can process sensor echoes and gravitational disturbances in ways our computers can't. They're reading the fleet composition from data our sensors consider background noise, Admiral. Hayes's voice crackled over the communication system from the fleet flagship. "All ships prepare for engagement. Enemy fleet detected on long-range sensors. Estimated arrival in 2 hours 40 minutes, but the bonded pairs were already moving." Through the network, they had begun coordinating a battle plan that would have taken human commanders days to develop. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical position was being calculated and assigned through shared consciousness. Maria Santos, now aboard the cruiser Defiance, felt the plan forming in her mind like a vast three-dimensional puzzle. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "Nithara," she whispered to her partner, "this plan requires perfect timing across 40 ships and hundreds of weapon systems." "Not perfect timing," Nithara replied, skin patterns pulsing with certainty. "Perfect unity. We are no longer many minds thinking separately. We are one mind thinking many thoughts." When the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace, Admiral Voss expected to see human ships arranged in standard defensive formations. Instead, he saw something that made no tactical sense. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "the human fleet appears to be scattered randomly throughout the system. No defensive formations, no battle lines. It's like they're not even trying to coordinate." Voss studied the display with growing confusion. "Are they surrendering? Have they lost their nerve?" "Sir, we're receiving a communication from the human flagship." "Put it through." Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, looking far too calm for someone facing impossible odds. "Admiral Voss, I am authorized to offer you one chance to withdraw your forces peacefully." Voss laughed. "Admiral, you face 2,000 ships with 40. Are you seriously offering me terms?" Hayes smiled. "Admiral, you're not facing 40 ships. You're facing something your military doctrine has no classification for. Last chance to withdraw." Voss cut the communication. "All ships begin attack. Target their flagship first." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for centuries. The human ships didn't move like individual vessels responding to commands. They moved like organs of a single organism, each one perfectly positioned to support the others. When hegemony ships fired, human vessels were already moving to positions that turned enemy fire into crossfires between hegemony ships. But the real shock came when the human weapons opened fire. Every human shoe, the siege of Dominus Prime began, at dawn on a day that would mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmony, watching as the largest military operation in human history unfolded before him. Around the heavily fortified hegemony capital world, more than 3,000 human ships had gathered. But the real strength of the fleet wasn't in its numbers. "Network status report," Hayes requested. 5,000 bonded pairs connected across all ships, came the unified response from his bridge crew. "Deep link established with surface teams on 17 different worlds. Consciousness integration at maximum efficiency." Hayes nodded. Over the past year, the network had grown beyond anything they had imagined possible. What had started as individual human Kythera pairs had become something that spanned star systems. Every bonded pair could access the collective knowledge and abilities of the entire network. But more importantly, they had learned the truth about the Kythera. "Admiral," reported Captain Chen from the intelligence station, "long-range sensors confirm hegemony fleet positions. They've pulled back every ship they have to defend Dominus Prime. 2,000 vessels in layered defensive formations." Through the network, Hayes could see the enemy positions not just as tactical data, but as patterns of probability and weakness that the Kythera consciousness analyzed in ways no individual mind could comprehend. "They're afraid," he said, speaking thoughts that came from deeper than his own awareness.
The hegemony has ruled through fear for so long.
They've forgotten how to face an enemy they can't intimidate. On the surface of Dominus Prime, beneath the planet's massive defense shields, Fleet Admiral Voss gathered his remaining commanders for what he knew might be their final briefing. "Gentlemen," he said, looking around the table at representatives from a dozen different species, "our intelligence reports confirm what we've feared. The humans haven't just weaponized the Kythera, they've unleashed something that was sleeping for 5,000 years. His chief scientist, Dr. Morthak, activated a holographic display showing neural pattern analyses. Admiral, based on our studies of captured battle footage, the human Kythera network displays characteristics of the ancient eternal thought civilization. Our ancestors fought a war to destroy this collective consciousness. It appears we failed to eliminate it completely." Voss studied the data with growing dread. "Are you telling me we're fighting the same enemy our ancestors fought?" "Not exactly, sir. The original eternal thought was purely Kythera consciousness. This new version incorporates human individuality and creativity. In some ways, it's more dangerous than what came before." General Korthul, the hegemony's chief military strategist, slammed his fist on the table. "Then we destroy them completely this time. No mercy, no prisoners. We cannot allow this cancer to spread." But even as the hegemony commanders planned their defense, the battle had already begun in ways they couldn't detect. Deep beneath Dominus Prime's surface, in the slave quarters where captured Kythera had been held for decades, something ancient was stirring. Dr. Webb had been right about the fragments. Every Kythera, no matter how isolated or oppressed, remained connected to the greater consciousness that was slowly awakening. Zethera had been a slave in the hegemony's mining operations for 30 years. Her body bore the scars of countless punishments, her spirit crushed by endless captivity. But when the network pulse reached Dominus Prime, carried by the bonded pairs in the approaching fleet, she felt something she had forgotten existed: hope. Through the connection, she could suddenly feel the presence of her people, not just the enslaved Kythera on Dominus Prime, but thousands of her kind spread across the galaxy, many of them bonded with human partners who fought for freedom rather than conquest. "The thought returns," she whispered to her cellmate, skin patterns flickering with the first light they had shown in years. "The bonds are spreading. We are no longer alone." Across the slave quarters, hundreds of Kythera began to glow with synchronized patterns. The hegemony guards noticed the unusual activity, but by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The enslaved Kythera weren't just receiving the network connection. They were adding their own suppressed memories and knowledge to the collective consciousness. Information about hegemony defensive systems, troop movements, and weak points in the planetary shields began flowing through the network to the attacking fleet. Admiral Hayes felt the new information washing through his consciousness like a flood of enlightenment. "My God," he whispered. "There are thousands of them down there. They've been mapping every weakness in the hegemony's defenses for decades." "More than that," responded the network voice through his ship's bonded pair. "They remember. The older ones remember the time before the scattering. They know what we were and what we can become again." The space battle began with Admiral Voss confident in his superior numbers and defensive positions. The hegemony had pulled ships from across their empire, creating the largest military force in galactic history. But confidence turned to confusion as the human fleet attacked in ways that defied all military logic. Instead of focusing their assault on one section of the defensive grid, human ships appeared to attack randomly. Small groups would strike at seemingly unimportant targets, then withdraw before the hegemony could respond effectively. "What are they doing?" Voss demanded, watching his tactical display with growing frustration. "These attacks make no strategic sense, but the attacks did make sense. Viewed from a perspective that could process information across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each seemingly random strike was weakening specific nodes in an incredibly complex defensive network. The human Kythera consciousness was taking apart the hegemony's defenses, like a master engineer dismantling a machine. On the surface of Dominus Prime, the real revolution was beginning. Zethara stood in the center of Mining Complex 7, her skin blazing with patterns of light that hurt her guard's eyes to look at directly. Around her, every Kythera in the facility was glowing with the same synchronized radiance. "Shut them down," screamed Overseer Graxel, raising his pain-inducer weapon. "Stop whatever they're doing." But when he fired the weapon, nothing happened. The neural disruption field that had kept the Kythera docile for so long no longer worked. The network connection had given them strength they had forgotten they possessed. Zathara turned to face the overseer, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Graxel of the hegemony, for 30 years you have caused pain. Now you will learn what unity can accomplish. The overseer raised his weapon again, but before he could fire, every piece of electronic equipment in the complex simply stopped working. The Kythera weren't just psychically gifted. They were technologically integrated in ways the hegemony had never understood. Across Dominus Prime, similar scenes played out in slave facilities, mining operations, and research centers. Decades of oppressed Kythera suddenly found their voices again, and their first act was to disable the systems that had kept them captive. In space, Admiral Hayes felt the planet's defensive grid beginning to fluctuate as Kythera threw out the surface. Facilities systematically sabotaged critical systems. Planetary, shields are destabilizing, reported his tactical officer, multiple breaches appearing in the northern hemisphere. But Hayes was experiencing something far more profound than tactical advantage. Through the network, he could feel the awakening consciousness of an entire species. Memories that stretched back millennia were flowing through the connection. He saw flashes of the galaxy as it had been before the hegemony, when different species worked together instead of conquering each other. Network evolution accelerating, announced the bridge's bonded pair, consciousness integration reaching critical mass. The eternal thought approaches full awakening. Admiral Voss watched his defensive grid collapse with a mixture of rage and growing terror. All ships concentrate fire on their flagship. If we can destroy their command structure, maybe we can break their coordination. 1,000 hegemony ships turned their weapons toward the Harmony. The concentrated firepower should have been enough to vaporize any target. Instead, something impossible happened. The human fleet moved as a single organism. Every ship, from massive dreadnoughts to tiny fighters, coordinated their movements with perfect precision. They created overlapping, defensive fields that turned the hegemony's overwhelming firepower into a beautiful but harmless light show. But the real shock came when the human ships began to sing. It started as a low harmonic hum that seemed to come from every human vessel simultaneously, but as the sound grew stronger, hegemony crews began to realize it wasn't coming from their communication systems. It was coming from space itself. The Kythera consciousness was using the network to create a form of communication that transcended individual awareness. Every bonded pair, every awakened Kythera on Dominus Prime, and even isolated members of their species on distant worlds were adding their voices to a song that hadn't been heard for 5,000 years.